Jenna wiped the sweat from her brow, adjusting the strap of her cleaning cart as she moved down the quiet hallway of the towering Maxwell corporate plaza. The polished floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting the effort she put into her work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. She had taken the janitorial job a few months ago, hoping to save enough money to go back to college. Every night, while the city lights flickered outside, she scrubbed, dusted, and mopped her way through the 20-story building, dreaming of a future that seemed just out of reach. It was late in the evening, and most of the office workers had already left, their hurried footsteps and chatter replaced by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Jenna preferred this quiet time. Just her thoughts, and the rhythmic swish of her mop. But tonight, something felt off. As she entered the executive floor, she heard it, a faint, muffled sob coming from somewhere down the corridor. She paused, her heartbeat quickening. Was someone still here? She turned off the vacuum cleaner and listened carefully. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was crying. Curiosity and concern pushed her forward. She followed the sound, her sneakers making almost no noise against the marble floor. As she rounded a corner near the conference rooms, her breath caught in her throat. Two little girls sat huddled together on a plush gray couch, their small bodies trembling as they clung to each other. They couldn't have been older than 5 or 6, their matching curly dark brown hair a tangled mess. One of them wiped her teary eyes with the sleeve of her tiny pink sweater, while the other sniffled, her arms wrapped tightly around her sister. Jenna's heart clenched. What were they doing here all alone? She knelt down slowly, careful not to startle them. "Hey there," she said gently, offering them a soft smile. "Are you okay?" The girls looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. The older one hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. We can't find Daddy." Jenna glanced around, half expecting a frantic parent to come rushing in any second. But the hallway was empty. No security guards. No office workers. Just her and these 2 scared little girls. "Okay," she said, keeping her voice calm. "Do you remember where you last saw him?" The younger girl sniffled. "We were with him, but then we turned around, and he was gone." Jenna's mind raced. This wasn't a place where kids usually wandered around alone. The top floors of the building were mostly occupied by high-ranking executives. Whoever their father was, he was likely important. "Don't worry," she assured them. "I'll help you find him. You're safe with me." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pack of tissues, handing them to the girls. The older one wiped her sister's face first, before dabbing at her own tears. Jenna gave them a moment, then gently took their hands. "Come on," she said. "Let's go find your dad." As they walked back toward the main lobby, Jenna couldn't help but feel a sense of protectiveness over the 2. They were so small, so vulnerable. She wondered what kind of father would be so careless as to lose track of them in a place like this. They'd reached the front desk, where the night receptionist, Mrs. Tate, sat behind the large mahogany counter, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, raising an eyebrow at the sight of Jenna holding hands with 2 little girls. "What's going on?" Mrs. Tate asked, straightening in her chair. "They're lost," Jenna explained. "They said they were with their dad, but they don't know where he went." Mrs. Tate frowned, immediately picking up the desk phone. "I'll call security." Before she could dial, the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby dinged open. A tall man stepped out, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The moment his gaze landed on the twins, relief flooded his face. "Emma. Leela." His deep voice echoed through the lobby as he strode toward them. The girls let go of Jenna's hands and ran to him, their tiny arms wrapping around his legs. He crouched down, pulling them into a tight embrace. Jenna watched silently, noting the way he held them, as if he'd never let them go again. "I was so worried," he murmured, rushing a kiss against their foreheads. "I thought I lost you." Jenna took a step back, suddenly feeling like an outsider in the emotional reunion. It wasn't until he lifted his gaze to her that she realized just how intense his presence was. His deep brown eyes locked onto hers, filled with gratitude, but also something else, curiosity. "You found them?" he asked. Jenna nodded. "They were up on the executive floor, alone. I couldn't just leave them there." His jaw tightened, and for a split second, she thought she saw something like guilt flash across his face. "Thank you," he said, rising to his full height. "I don't know how they got separated from me. One moment they were there, and the next." He shook his head. "I appreciate what you did." "It's no problem," she said, stuffing her hands into the pockets of her uniform. "Just glad they're safe." He extended a hand. "I'm Daniel Carter." Jenna hesitated before shaking it. His grip was firm, confident, but there was warmth there too. "Jenna," she replied. A small smile tugged at his lips. "I owe you one, Jenna." She opened her mouth to brush it off. But before she could speak, Mrs. Tate gasped. "Wait a minute. Carter." As in Daniel Carter, CEO of Carter Industries. Jenna's stomach dropped. "CEO." She turned back to the man standing before her, suddenly seeing him in a different light. The name sounded familiar now, like something she'd heard on the news. Carter Industries was one of the biggest companies in the city, specializing in technology and finance. Daniel Carter wasn't just any businessman. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country. Jenna's throat went dry. She had just helped the daughters of a millionaire. And from the way Daniel was looking at her now, she had a feeling this wasn't going to be the last time their paths would cross. Jenna barely slept that night. She tossed and turned in her tiny apartment, her mind replaying the events at the Maxwell corporate plaza. The crying little girls, the way they clung to her. And then the shocking realization that their father was Daniel Carter, one of the most powerful men in the city. She had read about him before. He was the kind of billionaire who rarely appeared in tabloids, not because he wasn't newsworthy, but because he was too smart to let the media dig too deep into his personal life. Unlike other CEOs who flaunted their wealth, Daniel Carter kept a low profile outside of business, and yet there he was last night, just a father terrified of losing his daughters. Jenna sighed, staring at the ceiling. She had never been in the presence of someone so powerful before, and the way he had looked at her before leaving, it was as if he was trying to memorize her face. The next morning, she tried to push the entire encounter out of her mind. She had work to do. She slipped into her uniform, pulled her curly hair into a tight ponytail, and grabbed her cleaning supplies before heading back to the towering skyscraper. It was another ordinary day, and she intended to keep it that way. But as soon as she entered the building, she knew something was different. People were whispering in small groups, their voices hushed but urgent. Jenna caught snippets of conversation as she walked toward the janitor's supply closet. "Did you hear?" one woman murmured to her coworker near the coffee station. "Mr. Carter is looking for someone. Something about last night." Jenna froze mid-step. She had a feeling she knew exactly who they were talking about. Keeping her head down, she made her way to the closet and grabbed her cart, willing herself to focus on the tasks ahead. Maybe he was looking for someone else. Maybe it had nothing to do with her. She was wrong. Barely an hour into her shift, while she was mopping the executive floor, she heard footsteps approaching. Expensive, polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. When she looked up, her breath caught. Daniel Carter stood a few feet away, watching her. Dressed in a navy blue suit, his presence was magnetic, effortlessly commanding the space. But it wasn't just his appearance that made Jenna pause. It was the look in his eyes. The same curiosity, the same unreadable expression from the night before. "You're a hard person to find," he said, his voice smooth but firm. Jenna gripped the mop handle tighter. "Didn't realize anyone was looking for me." Daniel took a slow step forward. "I never got a chance to properly thank you for helping my daughters last night." Jenna shrugged, trying to act like it was nothing. "I just did what anyone would do." "Not everyone would," he countered. "Not everyone stops to help." But you did. She didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, she focused on the bucket of soapy water at her feet. I was just doing my job. Daniel studied her for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black envelope. This is for you. Jenna eyed the envelope warily. What is it? A thank you gift. She didn't take it. Instead, she straightened her posture, her expression cautious. I don't need a gift. Daniel's lips quirked into something almost resembling amusement. It's not charity. It's appreciation. Jenna hesitated. She had met plenty of wealthy people in this building, and most of them ignored her existence entirely. But Daniel Carter was standing here, personally seeking her out. Reluctantly, she took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a check. She almost dropped it when she saw the number written on it. $5,000. Her heart pounded in her chest. That was more money than she made in months. It could pay off her rent for nearly half a year. It could go straight into her savings for college. But something inside her resisted. She swallowed hard and slowly handed the check back to him. I can't accept this. Daniel blinked, as if surprised. Why not? Because I didn't do it for money. She exhaled, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I helped your daughters because they were scared and needed someone. That's it. Daniel studied her, his expression unreadable once more. Then, to her shock, he smiled. A real smile. I respect that. Jenna shifted uncomfortably. I should get back to work. But before she could turn away, Daniel spoke again. Jenna. She paused, looking at him. I could use someone like you. Her brows knitted together. What? He slipped his hands into his pockets. I run a business. And in business, it's rare to find people who do the right thing simply because it's right. His gaze was steady, assessing her. You didn't just help my daughters. You protected them. That says a lot about who you are. Jenna wasn't sure where he was going with this. I'm just a janitor. No, Daniel said, shaking his head. You're more than that. Her heart pounded. What was he saying? Was he offering her a job? Before she could ask, a small voice broke through the tension. Miss Jenna. She turned, only to see the twins, Emma and Leela, standing by the elevator. Their tiny faces lit up as they ran toward her, wrapping their little arms around her legs. Jenna stiffened, completely caught off guard. Daniel chuckled. Looks like they've taken a liking to you. Jenna looked down at the twins, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. Emma grinned up at her. Daddy said we could see you again. Jenna glanced up at Daniel, who met her gaze with a quiet intensity. I meant what I said, he murmured. I could use someone like you. Think about it. Jenna didn't know what to say. The janitorial job had been temporary, a means to an end. But now, standing between a billionaire and his two daughters, she felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just a janitor anymore, and she had a feeling her life was about to change in ways she never expected. Jenna couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's words as she went through the rest of her shift. I could use someone like you. What did that even mean? Was he offering her a job? If so, what kind of job? It wasn't like she had any high-level qualifications. She was just a janitor trying to survive. And yet something about the way he said it, so certain, so direct, made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change. But she had been let down before. Life had never handed her anything for free, and she wasn't about to start believing in fairy tales now. By the time her shift ended, she was exhausted, both physically and mentally. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, she expected to make the long walk back to her tiny apartment. But the moment she turned the corner, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. A sleek black car was parked near the entrance of the building, and standing beside it, hands in his pockets, was Daniel Carter. She hesitated. He hadn't seen her yet, and part of her debated whether she should turn around and walk the other way. But before she could make a decision, Daniel lifted his head and met her gaze. You avoided me all day, he said casually, as if they were old friends. Jenna exhaled sharply. I was working. And now you're off. He motioned to the car. Let me give you a ride home. Jenna frowned. That's not necessary. Daniel raised a brow. You don't even know where you're going. She hesitated again. The truth was, she didn't want him to see where she lived. She had grown up learning that people like him, people with money, power, and influence, would never understand the struggles of people like her. She didn't need his pity. But Daniel didn't look like he was offering a ride out of obligation. He seemed genuinely interested in her, and that unsettled her more than anything else. With a sigh, she finally nodded. Fine. Daniel opened the back door for her, and she slid inside. The moment she sat down, she felt out of place. The interior of the car was like something out of a movie. Black leather seats, a scent that was both clean and expensive, and a driver who sat silently at the wheel, waiting for instructions. Daniel got in beside her, and the door shut with a quiet click. Where to? He asked. Jenna hesitated for a moment before reluctantly giving her address. She expected him to react, to make some comment about the rough part of town she lived in. But he didn't. He just nodded at the driver, and the car pulled away from the curb. For a few moments, there was silence. Jenna stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. She could feel Daniel's gaze on her, but she refused to look at him. Finally, he broke the silence. Why did you turn down the check? Jenna sighed. I already told you. I didn't help your daughters for money. I know, Daniel said. That's why I want to offer you something else. She finally turned to look at him. Like what? A job, he said simply. Jenna blinked. I have a job. I mean a better one, Daniel clarified. Something that actually pays you what you deserve. Jenna frowned. And what exactly do you think I deserve? Daniel leaned back against the seat, studying her. Something more than cleaning floors in a building full of people who don't even know your name. Jenna clenched her fists. You don't know anything about me. Maybe not, he admitted. But I know you're smart. You're good with people. You have a way of making others feel safe. He paused. And my daughters adore you. Jenna swallowed hard. So what? You want me to be their babysitter? Daniel chuckled. Not exactly. She narrowed her eyes. Then what? Daniel took a deep breath before answering. I want you to be my personal assistant. Jenna stared at him, stunned. What? I need someone I can trust, Daniel continued. Someone who won't just tell me what I want to hear. Someone who isn't afraid to stand up for what's right. And after last night, I have no doubt that you're that kind of person. Jenna shook her head. I don't have experience for something like that. I don't care, Daniel said smoothly. I can teach you everything you need to know. Jenna looked at him like he was insane. Why me? Daniel held her gaze. Because I trust you. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said those words to her before. The car slowed to a stop in front of her apartment building, and the driver put it in park. Jenna turned to look out the window, her tiny apartment complex looking even smaller compared to the luxurious car she was sitting in. She had spent years surviving, working hard just to scrape by. And now, a billionaire was offering her an opportunity she never could have imagined. But could she trust it? Could she trust him? She turned back to Daniel. I need to think about it. Daniel nodded, as if he had expected that. Take your time. She hesitated for a moment, then reached for the door handle. Before she could step out, Daniel spoke again. One more thing. Jenna looked at him questioningly. If you say yes, he said, it's not just a job. It's a whole new life. Jenna swallowed hard. She had no idea if she was ready for that. But something told her that whether she was ready or not, her life was already changing. Jenna barely slept that night. She lay awake in her tiny apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying Daniel's words over and over in her head. A whole new life. The idea of it was terrifying. She had spent her entire existence fighting for survival, working jobs that barely paid the bills, expecting nothing more from life than what she could earn with her own two hands. And now, out of nowhere, a billionaire was offering her a chance to step into a completely different world. It felt surreal, impossible, too good to be true. And yet, she couldn't ignore the tiny spark of curiosity inside her. What if he was serious? What if this wasn't some kind of trick or pity offer? What if, for once in her life, someone actually saw her potential? By the time the sun rose, she had made up her mind. She didn't know if this was a mistake. She didn't know if she could trust Daniel Carter. But she knew one thing for sure. She was tired of just surviving. It was time to see what else the world had to offer. Later that morning, Jenna found herself standing outside Daniel's office on the top floor of Carter Enterprises. She had never been this high up before. The building stretched so far into the sky that when she looked out the window, the entire city looked like a miniature model. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. A week ago, she had been mopping floors in this very building. Now she was about to walk into the CEO's office as something else entirely. A potential employee. A personal assistant. A whole new life. She knocked on the door, and a voice from inside called, "Come in." Jenna stepped inside, and there he was, Daniel Carter, standing by his massive glass desk, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. His presence filled the room. But what caught Jenna's attention wasn't him. It was the two little girls sitting on the couch near the window. Ellie and Emma, the twins she had found crying just days ago. They looked up the moment she entered, their faces lighting up. "Jenna," Emma squealed, jumping off the couch and running toward her. Jenna barely had time to react before the little girl flung her arms around her waist, hugging her tight. Ellie, the more reserved of the two, followed behind her sister, though she didn't say anything. She just stared up at Jenna with big, hopeful eyes. Jenna hesitated before kneeling down. "Hey, you two," she said gently. "What are you doing here?" Daniel stepped forward, slipping his hands into his pockets. "They insisted on seeing you before we started." Jenna looked between him and the girls. "Before we started? What?" Daniel's lips curved slightly. "Your new job." Jenna's heart skipped. "So that's it. You just assume I'm going to say yes." Daniel shrugged. "I had a feeling." Jenna exhaled, looking down at the twins. Their little faces were so full of trust, so full of belief in her, and it did something to her chest that she wasn't ready for. She wasn't used to being needed. She wasn't used to mattering. And yet here she was. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll do it." Ellie and Emma both gasped excitedly, and even Daniel's expression flickered with something close to satisfaction. But Jenna held up a hand. "On one condition." Daniel raised a brow. "Which is?" Jenna straightened her spine, looking him directly in the eye. "No special treatment," she said firmly. "If I'm going to work for you, I want to earn it. No pity, no favors, no handouts." Daniel's lips quirked up into a smirk. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Jenna's first day as Daniel Carter's personal assistant was overwhelming, to say the least. She had barely stepped into the role when she realized just how much responsibility came with it. Daniel wasn't just a billionaire CEO. He was the head of one of the largest corporations in the country, and every minute of his day was accounted for. Meetings, contracts, calls with international investors, and somehow Jenna was supposed to keep up with it all. She quickly learned that Daniel wasn't the easiest boss. He expected excellence. No mistakes, no hesitation. But he was also patient. Whenever she fumbled or hesitated, he would watch her carefully and simply say, "Try again." Not "You're doing it wrong." Not "I should have hired someone else." Just "Try again." And that, more than anything, made Jenna push herself harder. She spent the entire day shadowing him, taking notes, memorizing schedules, and doing her best to anticipate what he needed before he even asked. By the time the sun was setting, she was exhausted. Her feet ached. Her brain was fried. But for the first time in a long time, she felt good. She wasn't just cleaning floors anymore. She was learning. She was growing. And it felt amazing. That evening, as she was packing up her things to leave, Daniel called her name. She turned to find him leaning against his desk, watching her with a thoughtful expression. "You did well today," he said simply. Jenna blinked. "Seriously?" Daniel smirked. "You sound surprised." "I am surprised," Jenna admitted. "I thought for sure I'd screw something up." "You will," Daniel said easily. "Eventually. But that's how you get better." Jenna let out a short laugh. "You really don't believe in sugarcoating things, do you?" Daniel shrugged. "Why waste time?" Jenna smiled despite herself. And then, to her surprise, he said, "Come have dinner with me." Jenna froze. Her heart did a weird little flip in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said carefully. Daniel tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because," Jenna said, crossing her arms, "you're my boss." Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then, to her shock, he grinned. "All right," he said easily. "Then consider it a business dinner." Jenna narrowed her eyes. "That sounds suspiciously like a loophole." Daniel just shrugged. "You can call it whatever you want." Jenna hesitated. She had spent her entire life keeping her distance from people like him. Rich, powerful, untouchable. But Daniel Carter wasn't like anyone she had ever met before, and against her better judgment, she was starting to like him. Maybe a business dinner wouldn't be so bad. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take another step into this whole new life. Jenna sat in the passenger seat of Daniel's sleek black car, watching the city lights blur past the window. Dinner had been his idea, a business dinner, as he called it. But as they left the office and stepped into his world, Jenna couldn't help but wonder if there was more to it than that. She had spent the past few weeks learning everything about Daniel Carter, the businessman, the perfectionist, the CEO. But tonight, sitting beside him in a car that cost more than she'd make in 5 years, she realized she knew almost nothing about Daniel Carter, the man. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. Daniel smirked, his eyes never leaving the road. "You'll see." Jenna exhaled, shaking her head. "You love being mysterious, don't you? It keeps things interesting." She rolled her eyes but couldn't fight the small smile on her lips. Minutes later, the car pulled into a quiet, elegant neighborhood. The streets were lined with towering oak trees, and the houses weren't just big. They were estates. Jenna's stomach tightened. This wasn't just wealth. This was a completely different reality from the one she had grown up in. Daniel parked in front of a grand, modern house with floor-to-ceiling windows and a driveway longer than an entire city block. Jenna swallowed. "This is your house." Daniel unbuckled his seatbelt. "One of them." She turned to look at him in disbelief. "One of them." He smirked but said nothing. Jenna hesitated. She hadn't expected dinner to be at his house. She had assumed they were going to some overpriced restaurant where she'd feel out of place. But this felt even more dangerous, like she was stepping into something she couldn't walk away from. Still, she followed him up the stone steps, her heart pounding as he pushed the door open and led her inside. The house was massive, but not in the cold, empty way she had expected. It was warm, inviting, soft lighting, tasteful decor. It felt like a home. As she stepped inside, the sound of small, running footsteps caught her attention. Ellie and Emma came barreling down the hallway, their tiny faces lighting up when they saw her. "Jenna!" Emma cried, launching herself into Jenna's arms. Ellie, more reserved as always, stayed back but smiled shyly. Jenna blinked in surprise, holding the little girl close. "You two are still awake." Daniel chuckled. setting his keys down. They insisted. Ellie tugged on Jenna's hand, her voice soft. "Daddy said you were coming for dinner." Jenna felt something tighten in her chest. She had spent so much of her life being invisible, unimportant. And now, these two little girls had been waiting for her. Jenna smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair behind Ellie's ear. "Well, I'm here." Emma grabbed her other hand. "Come see our playroom." Jenna laughed. All right. But only for a minute." She followed them down the hall, glancing back at Daniel, who simply watched with quiet amusement. Something about the way he looked at her made her heart race. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing. After a very enthusiastic tour of the twins' playroom, complete with an excessive amount of stuffed animals, Jenna found herself sitting at a long dining table across from Daniel, while the girls ate happily beside them. The food was incredible, probably made by a private chef, though Daniel didn't say. Jenna took a sip of her wine, glancing up at him. "So," she said, "do you always bring your assistants home for dinner?" Daniel smirked. "Only the ones who save my daughters." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Right, because I'm so special." His expression turned serious. "You are." The air between them shifted. Jenna set her glass down. "Daniel," she hesitated, "why did you offer me this job?" He leaned back, watching her carefully. "Why do you think?" Jenna frowned. "I don't know. That's why I'm asking." Daniel exhaled, his gaze dropping to his plate for a brief moment before he spoke. "When I saw you with Ellie and Emma that day," he said slowly, "I realized something." Jenna waited. Daniel looked back at her. "They trust you," he said simply. "And that's not something they do easily." Jenna felt her breath catch. Daniel continued. "After their mother left, they became guarded. They don't open up to people. They don't let just anyone in." His eyes softened. "But they let you in." Jenna swallowed. She hadn't expected that answer. She hadn't expected him to be this open. "I needed someone I could trust," Daniel said quietly. "Not just for work, but for them." Jenna's chest tightened. This wasn't just about business. It never had been. And suddenly, she wasn't sure what scared her more, the weight of that trust, or the way she wanted to be worthy of it. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, and Jenna was getting ready to leave, Daniel walked her to the door. The cool night air drifted in as she stepped outside, and she turned back to look at him. "This was," she hesitated. "Nice." Daniel smirked. "That sounded painful for you to admit." Jenna rolled her eyes, but she smiled. For a long moment, they just stood there. The city lights flickered in the distance. Jenna could feel the weight of his gaze, and for the first time since meeting him, she wasn't sure if she wanted to run from it or lean into it. Daniel took a step closer. "Jenna," he said softly. She swallowed, her heart pounding. "Yeah." There was something in his eyes, something unreadable, something dangerous, something that made her breath hitch. But instead of saying whatever he had been about to say, he simply exhaled and shook his head. "Get home safe," he murmured. Jenna nodded, stepping back. She turned, walking toward the car Daniel had arranged for her. But as she climbed inside and the door shut behind her, she realized something. She had been worried about stepping into his world. But now, she was starting to wonder if she'd ever be able to step out of it. Jenna sat in her tiny apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The dim glow of the bedside lamp cast soft shadows on the walls, but her mind was anything but calm. It had been 3 days since dinner at Daniel's house, and she still couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She had spent the weekend trying to distract herself, but no matter what she did, her thoughts always drifted back to him, to the way he had looked at her, the weight of his words, the way Ellie and Emma had clung to her like she belonged there. And now, as she sat here, staring at her own reflection, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She was in too deep. A knock at her door jolted her from her thoughts. She frowned, glancing at the clock. It was past 10. Who would be visiting her at this hour? Cautiously, she walked to the door and peeked through the peephole. Her breath caught. Daniel. Her heart pounded as she unlocked the door and pulled it open. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking slightly out of place in the dimly lit hallway of her modest apartment building. His usual polished exterior was still intact, perfectly tailored suit, sharp features, but his expression was different, uncertain, vulnerable. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Daniel exhaled, shifting on his feet. "I needed to see you." Jenna's stomach twisted. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. Still, she stepped aside. "Come in." Daniel hesitated for only a second before walking inside. His presence made her tiny apartment feel even smaller. Jenna closed the door and turned to face him. "Daniel, what's going on?" For a moment, he didn't speak. He just looked around. At the stack of books on her coffee table, the slightly worn-out couch, the faint smell of lavender from the candle burning on the counter. Then he looked at her. "Why didn't you call?" he asked quietly. Jenna blinked. "Call? You've been avoiding me." She swallowed, crossing her arms. "I wasn't avoiding you. I was just giving us space." Daniel nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer. "I don't want space." Jenna's breath hitched. This was dangerous. This was so dangerous. She had spent her whole life staying in her lane, keeping her head down, not making mistakes. And yet, standing here now, looking into the eyes of the most powerful man she had ever met, she knew this was a mistake she was willing to make. "Daniel," she started, but he cut her off. "I don't do this," he said. "I don't chase people. I don't need to. But with you?" He stepped closer, his voice softer now. "I can't stop thinking about you, Jenna." Her pulse roared in her ears. She should stop this. She had to stop this. But she couldn't. "Say something," he murmured. Jenna exhaled shakily. "I don't know what you want me to say." Daniel reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, almost hesitant. "Tell me I'm not crazy," he said. "Tell me you feel this too." Jenna closed her eyes. She had spent her whole life building walls. But right now, they were crumbling. Slowly, she opened her eyes and met his gaze. "You're not crazy," she whispered. Daniel let out a breath, almost like relief, before cupping her face in his hands. He didn't kiss her, not yet. He was waiting for her. And that's what undid her. Because for the first time in her life, someone wasn't taking from her. They were waiting. For her choice. For her permission. And that made all the difference. So, she made her choice. She closed the space between them, her hands resting on his chest, her heartbeat hammering as she whispered, "Daniel." And then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was slow. Careful. Like he was afraid she might disappear if he moved too fast. Jenna melted into him, her fingers gripping his suit jacket as the world around them faded. It was terrifying. It was reckless. But for once in her life, she didn't care. Because for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. And she wasn't going to let fear take that away. Not this time.